have you ever wanted to know the secret to blind tasting and guessing a wine? Well, we're here to tell you today, and we are going to tell it all, give you all the secrets and tips on how to blind taste wine. So for 30 minutes, we're just going to chat 1, 2, 3 so blind tasting. I'm Shay Frechette, co-owner and co-winemaker here at Frechette Winery and winemaker for Sachet Wines. And joining me today is someone I'm a huge fan of, Alisha Blackwell-Calvert. She's of Exquisite Vines, and she's based in Missouri. Alisha, thank you so much for tasting wine with us today.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Hey, well, before we jump into blind wine tasting, I've got to know about you and Exquisite Vines. And I will say, I did take a peek at like what your degree is in, which has nothing to do with wines, but everything to do with one of my favorite animals. Can you give us a little bit of a inside scoop
Yeah.
on what you studied? And
Yeah. So before I got into wine, I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I went to William Woods University in Fulton, Missouri, where I was going to try to become a veterinarian and focus on horses. So obviously that didn't happen. I'm in the wine business now, but I still work with horses in my free time if I get free time. So since I was 21, I've worked as a horse and carriage driver in downtown St. Louis and still do that periodically.
awesome. Well, I love learning those tidbits because sometimes when you come into someone's world, you know them as like who they are at that moment, not knowing those little tidbits. And by the way, there are a lot of phenomenal brands out there with horses on them.
Yeah.
So you founded Exquisite Vines. What do you do under that umbrella of Exquisite Vines and Consulting? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So long story short, I am Exquisite Vines. So I'm an independent wine consultant. I assist with staff trainings, writing wine lists, consulting for like Wine Enthusiast Magazine, other local projects, and lend my voice to the food and beverage scene.
So you are just one that you're just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to wine and hospitality. And for your business, you teach other folks how to be amazing and phenomenal in wine and hospitality and customer service, just like you are. So thank you for what you do to uplift and improve what we do within our industry. It's so cool to see businesses like you. And I'm thrilled to get this opportunity to chat with you about blind wine tasting. So if you're not already following Alisha, make sure you follow us both here on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. Keep up with us. And if you have questions, please ask in the chat. We will be fielding questions today. So if you have that burning question that you're too embarrassed to ask, it is the perfect question to ask. So please drop that in the
Ask.
chat. Alisha, it's so dope to get this opportunity with you. Let's start with blind tasting. So what is blind tasting and why do we do it?
Yeah. So blind tasting is being given a glass of wine, and you have no idea what the contents are. Um, it could be red, it could be white, it could be rosé, it could be still or sparkling. It's a wine that you don't know the um, its identification. And what blind tasting is using your skills that you've acquired as a wine professional or as a wine enthusiast and pinpointing what is in the glass. So there's a few different ways to do it. You can do it on your own. You can blind taste with a wine tasting group. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely a skill that you should practice
Yeah.
doing. It's difficult. It's not something you can do overnight.
It's so cool when you watch a psalm. You can look on YouTube or Google it, and it's just so amazing. But there's a lot of practice behind it. But it's easy to say like, oh, a sommelier would blind taste. But do you have any insight on like just the regular old Joes, like those of us Joes and Janes that
Yeah.
went to blind taste? Like, why would we do it? How could that help us out in our wine journey and understanding blind tasting and learning how to blind taste?
I definitely recommend anyone who has an interest in wine learning how to blind taste. What that benefits you is that it helps you pinpoint what you like about certain wines or certain brands, the process it takes to make that wine, and kind of really connecting you with the process. So, you know, the language and the how to on how wine is produced and why you like it. In the end, it will help you understand what you like, what you don't like, and it'll help you find the next best bottle.
So we have a mystery wine flight that we offer in our tasting room. We offer a couple flights, and one is a mystery wine flight. And we'll say, in this flight, there's a cab, there's a cab franc, and there's a Malbec. And we give little tips, but the glasses are just numbered 1, 2, and 3. And so the guests, they get to go through a blind tasting experience and try and guess which is which. But at the end of the day, it's fun to do. But what I say to my guests is, I love to have you like really understand what you enjoy. Because if I were to give you a Cab Franc, for example, you may say, oh, I love Cab Franc, or maybe I don't care for Cab Franc. And that's the experience you go into that wine with. And so when you blind taste it, um, you're all of your senses are really working to try and figure out what that wine is. And a lot of times folks will say, oh, I love number one. And when we reveal that, let's say, for example, number one is, I don't know, a Cabernet Franc, they go, oh my gosh, I would never just order a Cabernet Franc.
Yes.
I just don't think I enjoy it. And I'm not even familiar with it. So that's what I love when it comes to blind tasting, is the opportunity to get to delight folks and have them just kind of go in with, just kind of blindly, if you will. Well, we're going to get into it, and we're going to go into the steps to blind tasting wine. We're talking blind tasting with me, Shay Burchett, and sommelier Alisha Blackwell-Calvert with Exquisite Vines in Missouri. So let us know in the chat if you've ever done a blind wine tasting before and what questions you might have, because we are about to get into it. So let's talk steps of blind tasting. Alisha, can you take us through, just starting with number one, like what do you do when someone gives you a glass of wine and you have no idea what's in it? Take us through the steps.
Yeah. So the first thing you need to do is look at the wine itself. So if you're practicing at home or practicing with friends, just grab a blank sheet of white paper, have nice bright setting. You want to actually look and inspect, examine the wine. So you always do that first. So I'm just going to take my mystery wine here. I know what it is, but what? So what am I looking for, right? So I'm looking at the wine. I'm looking down into the wine, and one of the first things I notice is that it's very clear. There's no sediment. There's no particulates of any sort. Nice bright wine. The color is a big indicator of what the varietal could be. So I'm going to look at the color of the wine. This wine is ruby. One of the reasons that's important is that as we're blind tasting wines, especially as sommeliers, what we are focusing on are the classics. So we want to take the classically made wines and varietals of the world, and that's what we're focusing on as far as blind tasting, at least through the Court of Master Sommeliers, which I'm, a fan of still, believe it or not. So we're looking at the color of the wine. The wine is ruby. We're looking at the rim variation. So what the rim variation is how the center of the wine changes from the core to the edge. I'm looking at this wine, and I'm finding that as we get closer to the edge of the glass, of the rim itself, it changes a little bit. It gets a little watery towards the end. So I'm taking that into consideration. Maybe it has a little bit of age on it, possibly. Maybe.
Okay.
So color tells you a lot about its age, what grape it could possibly be, and yeah.
And Alisha, too, I just point out something that you were doing. You were holding your wine. I know you pointed out the white piece of paper. You're holding it over at about what looks like a 45-degree angle and looking over the glass, which I think that's important to know, because I know sometimes folks like to kind of look up this way, like hold their wine glass up at the light and look up. But what you were showing with really good lighting, looking over the top of the glass over a white piece of paper, I think is key. So thanks for that, and thanks for taking us through that so slowly. So we're looking at the color of the wine, noticing some of the things that you pointed out. So what comes next?
Yeah, so after we take color into consideration, this is kind of when I give the wine a swirl. There's a few times you want to swirl your wine. We had a chat previously about people swirling their wine and kind of beating it to death in the glass. We don't want to do that. Just I give it a swirl, and we're going to look at what we call tiers or legs. What does legs and tiers tell you about this potential wine? I'm looking at how the tears are streaming down the glass, or maybe the lack of. If it's sheeting down, that tells me that the wine doesn't have a lot of alcohol or sugar. If it's tearing up and kind of having these long streams, what that is it's an indication of surface tension. So surface tension is made two ways in a wine, with sugar content and alcohol content. So if it's sheeting down, it has low sugar, low alcohol, or both. And if it's beating, kind of legs tearing, if you will, it's telling me that it has a higher sugar content or possibly higher alcohol content, depending on the wine. So I take a look at that.
That's good to point out, Alisha, because I know sometimes, I mean, it's cool to say like, ooh, look at the legs. And not that you're talking about the person that's with you, you're talking about the glass here, like the wine in the glass. But thank you for the explanation, because a lot of times,
Yes,
it can be confusing on like what that really needs. So, and I saw that you were swirling. Good,
consider.
Yeah, good swirl game too. I like that. You were doing you do it so effortlessly.
No, it takes practice. So we've taken in color, we've taken in viscosity. I forgot secondary colors. Not only is it ruby, but there's also a little garnet in this wine too. So I wanted to go back to a second and talk about why we don't do this. The reason I put it to the side is also I'm taking into consideration the skin of the grape itself. So as I'm looking down inside of this wine, I'm able to read my little cheat sheet here. That's letting me know that this wine is made from a thin skin grape. If I weren't able to read my paper, it would come from a thick skin grape if it was opaque. So the reason we don't do this is that we can't really see what we're doing there, as far as being able to read through the glass. So little trick I learned a long time ago that treats me well still. So enough looking at the glass, let's smell it. So after you take all of those sight indicators into consideration, we're going to stick our nose in the glass. So as I'm putting my nose into the glass, I kind of have to put my nose inside of the glass to pull out the fruits and things I'm looking for. If I could smell the wine from here, that's letting me know it's a very intensely aromatic grape. If I have to stick my nose inside of the glass to pull out things to say about it, that means that it doesn't have a lot of intensity. So this one's kind of in the middle. It's hitting me right about here. And what I'm smelling is a lot of dirt. A lot of dirt in this glass. That's telling me a lot about where this wine is coming from. So I start with the things that jump out at me first. If it's a really fruity, fruit-forward wine, typically that's an indicator that it's coming from a warmer climate. What a warmer climate does is that as the sun is warming up the grapes, we are producing a lot of sugar. A lot of sugar equates to higher alcohol, just a richer, riper fruit content. Whereas places like Europe, where it's a little bit cooler, we're not so much focused on the fruit itself. We're focusing on that dirt, like those tart, earthy flavors. Those are a lot more prevalent from European-based wines. The first thing I smelled was potting soil, like dirt itself, possibly coming from Europe. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, okay.
Places in California that are a lot cooler nowadays and doing some really European-esque wines, but it's too soon to make a call. We don't know enough about this wine yet.
Well,
So.
you've already told us a whole lot about it. I mean, even when you're thinking about, as you're kind of going through this commentary, you're saying things like, oh, when I'm looking at I can read through it, and I'm thinking more of thin skin grapes. And so I think for a lot of us, we're thinking like, what are the grapes that we know of that are red and thin skin? And as you are kind of talking through aromatics of that wine, it's like, oh, where in the world will we smell that? So it's just kind of fun, like as you're talking, for those of us who've had wines from different areas, just kind of starting to think. And I know you're saying like we're not going to identify it right now, but just kind of pulling those things together is really fun listening to you. Listen to you share that. The thing about dirt too, I know that sometimes when it comes to describing wine, and when you said dirt, it just kind of made me think about this. Um, sometimes folks, when you say potting soil, and I'm a gardener, so I mean, I will sniff dirt and potting soil all day. A glass of wine and gardening is just, that's my thing. But it may not be an attractive aroma for a lot of folks. So any takes on, like, as we are smelling things, like how we can take that.
Right. And that's a fair point. So again, wine is subjective, right? So things I might experience in the glass, you might not experience. And that's perfectly okay. There's no right or wrong answer. When it comes to kind of learning how to taste and learning how to blind taste, use a language that is comfortable with you so you can pick it out. If you always smell XYZ wine and you always get dirt or potting soil, that's a marker for you, and that's valid. However, when it comes to a more professional setting, like maybe being a sommelier on the floor or working in a retail setting, where you're showing people different types of wines that they might have interest in, language is very important. So I wouldn't want to describe a wine tableside to you and say it tastes like, turned earth and river rocks and pencil shaving. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, those aren't things that people experience every day. So you're kind of losing the clientele there with flowery language.
I do think too, though, Alicia, what I can, and I totally get where you're going there. I agree with that. If I were at a restaurant and there were these language things, I'm just like, well, how many people actually know what that even smells like?
Right.
So I can appreciate a sommelier that has that knowledge, but still understands how to communicate and articulate to a guest in the best way possible.
Exactly.
What I can appreciate about what you said about potting soil is that I love the idea of tasting a place. And that to me is the wealth of appreciation that blind tasting can bring to you, especially when you're open to trying wines from all over the world. Wine is doing this, is about tasting a place. So I'm here on Red Mountain, one of the smallest AVAs in the state of Washington. And I love to taste Red Mountain. I love to taste Walla Walla Valley AVA. I love to taste Lake Chelan, AVA, ancient lakes. And so it's about tasting a place. And so as you're describing this, I'm thinking like, what place might taste like that? So thanks for introducing that. For the aromatics, any other aromatics that you would pick up from this, or any other feedback you would give us from smelling the wine?
Yeah. So when it comes to pinpointing what is in your glass, there's a lot to consider. So earth and fruit, especially fruit. And not only are we thinking about the fruit in the glass, we are considering the condition of the fruit in the glass. That tells you a lot about the wine, how it's made, where it comes from. So as I'm smelling this, I'm getting dried cranberry, dried strawberry, kind of like a dusty cherry. So that's kind of telling you a lot about what's going on in this wine. The opposite of that would be jammy cherry, like cherry pie, like really ripe baked fruit. That's telling you a lot about that wine. But I'm not getting that in the glass. I'm getting very dried out fruit. I'm getting dried rose petal, a little bit of violet. You want to consider things that you might not think about, like herbs and spices. Spices can tell you about potential oak content. or oak usage. Other things like vegetables. Are you getting green bell pepper? Are you getting lentil? Are you getting jalapeno? That could tell you a lot about what the varietal is. So for me, I'm getting almost like pizza spices, like oregano and thyme, all kind of dried out herbs, kind of from your garden, right?
There you go. I love it.
And I think possibly there might be some oak here. Like I'm getting just the scent of wood. Anytime you actually smell wood in a wine, that lets you know that not only possibly it's been aged or fermented in an oak barrel, but also the thyme and oak should be considered. So lots of like dried fruit, dried herbs, dried spice, and some like vanilla cardamom. So something to consider.
Wow.
All of that
Makes
probably
me want to go to my my spice cabinet or like my dried herbs that I have and just kind of, smell those things to um at least some of the things that you name become a bit more familiar with what those dried herbs would smell like. So what about tasting it? Can you taste it and tell us like what we'd be looking for there?
Yeah. So when you're tasting the wine, what you want to do is pretty much reconfirm everything you've smelled. So you kind of go through that checklist of things that we spoke with before, seeing if those elements of the wine have changed in any way, and if they change, what has changed. And also, is there anything new that we're discovering as we're tasting the wine? Is there anything else that is jumping out at you? Like, what is this wine trying to say as we're tasting it? So what am I doing? I'm switching the wine around in my mouth. I'm letting the wine coat my entire palate. And then, woo, so dry. So dry. I'm letting this wine give me all of the cues that it's trying to tell me, and I'm kind of internalizing that. So it's very dry.
When you say dry, are you can you explain, are you talking about the sweetness level? Or are you talking about dry from like
There's a couple
tannin?
things. So there's no sugar in this wine whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So like the fruit character is very tart.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you a lot. Tart fruit usually equates to an acidity level. The opposite of that is that if it was like really jammy, fruity, like baked fruit, you almost get like that sensation of sweetness. And I'm not getting that in this glass. It's like dried cranberry and like the raisins. That's what I'm getting.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This wine is taking all of the moisture out of my mouth, and now I can't talk. So possibly this is a wine that's enjoyed readily with food.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, that's what I'm thinking. So the fruit characters is the same, kind of dried out fruit. The herb character is dried out. I'm still getting that like vanilla from the oak. I'm still getting like that turned earth and button mushroom. Pretty much everything I've said about the wine is what's in the glass as I'm tasting it. So all of that has been reconfirmed.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Are there any other things beyond like a flavor? You talk dryness. Is there anything else that you're getting from the wine that you wouldn't pick up on the nose?
Yeah, so you can't pick up structure until you taste it. So we're going to move on to structure now. So the structure is, again, very dry. The acidity is very elevated. The alcohol content is medium plus, about average for a wine. But since this is a red wine, we have to consider tannin. So what tannin is that it's that chemical substance in the wine that is from the skins or the seeds from oak. It's a substance that in your mouth, it gives it that like drying sensation. It's almost kind of textile. So like tactile, I mean. So as I'm like moving my tongue around my mouth, I can like feel the wine. It has a lot of texture. So that's telling me a lot about it. beverage that has a lot of tannin is tea. So if you think about how tea has like that drying sensation, the more of that a wine has, the more tannic it is. So that's kind of a way to equate it. This wine has very high tannin, and that's either coming from oak, Timon oak, or the skin of the grape itself.
Mm-hmm.
A wine has medium body. Like to me, I equate body to milk.
Yeah.
So a wine can be light bodied, medium bodied, full bodied. Like we can have skim milk, 2%, and whole milk.
Yep.
To me, this wine is like drinking 2% milk. It's kind of medium bodied, not completely lush, but it's not like I'm drinking water.
Yeah.
It has length for days. Like if you can tell, it's been a while since I've had this wine. I can still feel it and taste it in my mouth. It's a very long finish. A short finish would be that if I sip the wine, it would dissipate. It disappear. I'm not getting that with this wine. I can still sense it on my palate.
And Alisha, one of the things that you're doing that I don't know if folks do when it comes to wine, I mean, we've been talking for a while about just this one wine. Mm-hmm. So what I noticed that you're doing is you're being very reflective, about this wine. Like it's in looking at your mannerisms, even like after you took the first sip of this wine, you kind of just like pause and you slush the wine around and you kind of let the wine do its thing. And even after you swallowed the wine, you were still just kind of waiting and developing, letting the wine do what it needed to do, yes, but also reflecting and thinking about that wine. So I would say, if I could throw a tip in, when you are blind tasting a wine, it's not that you have to jump right out and say something. It really is taking a moment and letting the wine do what it needs to do on your palate, so that you can pick up things like body and acid and tannin. And for you, as you're talking about those things, you didn't even have to take another sip of that wine to talk about the finish of that wine. And so that's the thing that I would say is blind tasting, be patient, take your time as you're going through the experience with that wine. And one of the tips that you gave when we were talking earlier is you just said, well, take 20 minutes. And I think that's a really great, a great length of time to, like, especially as you're just starting out, to slow down and peel the layers of that wine back, going through the steps that you did. Any finishing words or finishing tips you might have for the folks listening in who want to pick up something, some tips on blind wine tasting?
Yeah, definitely find a system that works for you and stay consistent with it. I personally like to use the blind tasting deductive method from the Court of Master Sommeliers. That's what works for me. But there are other systems out there. I think that the Wine Folly website has a really great grid, which is what I have here. That's definitely one I can recommend. I think it still is advanced, but Wine Folly does a great job of telling you like what the terms mean. So as you're practicing on your own or with friends, that'll help you build your confidence in that. So that's one I definitely recommend. Take your time. As a professional, I should take about 4 minutes to pinpoint it. But yeah, take your time, walk yourself through it.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you said, Alisha, is practice, practice, practice. And I guarantee if there's the folks who are watching this, first off, they will be interested in wine because they're watching us. And they probably have a few wines in their stash that they can have a friend come over and just select something and pour in some glasses and then practice blind tasting. Well, it has been an absolute delight getting to chat with you, Alisha. And by the way, we will be together virtually in 1 week for the Mystery Wine Challenge. And for those of you who want more of Alisha and you want to have her take you through a blind tasting challenge, then pop onto FrechetteWinery.com. You'll see there that we are featuring Exquisite Vines, Alisha being our guest som. So pop onto FrechetteWinery.com, pick up your Mystery Wine Challenge bottle of wine. You see that it is disguised and wrapped. And then on May 19th, which is a Thursday, We'll get together at 6:15 Pacific Standard Time. Alisha will do exactly what she just did, taking us step by step on how to blind taste the wine. And
So,
then we'll rip the label off at the end and reveal. So, Alisha, no, that's not the wine we're going to be tasting, but is
no,
that the wine you were
I
tasting?
was tasting. I was tasting the
What is it?
2016 Lamele Chianti Classico Reserva. So that's a wine I was describing today.
Fantastic. Well, you will teach us how to describe the wine as you did that one. I think that blind tasting truly is, there's a science and an art to it. It takes a long time. So, what you will do with us in 1 week is give us some more tips and take us through this step by step. And I think that folks will walk away being able to show off their new skills to their friends. If you're not doing it already, please do follow Alisha at Exquisite Vines, and you can find her on Instagram is probably where you want folks to follow you,
Yeah,
but you're also on LinkedIn,
yeah.
so you can follow her there as well. But make sure you follow her. She has a phenomenal Instagram page and does some really fun things there. So if you want to keep up with this pro in Missouri, then make sure that you're following her. If you're not following us at Frechette Winery, make sure you're following us on all of our platforms as well. So Alisha, it's been an absolute delight and a pleasure having you here.
Yes.
Uh, I'm going to see you in 1 week. But until then, cheers.
Yes. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.